Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Herb and I'm an alcoholic. Welcome to our monthly gathering for a Step Guide sponsored discussion. I've changed the prayers around a little bit. Let's see how that works. Please join me in the prayer for an open mind and an open heart. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, sponsorship, application of the 12 steps, and you for an open mind and a new experience with myself, sponsorship, application of the 12 steps, and especially you. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things that cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, as you know, we're here to basically share our experience, some of what we know in terms of our knowledge and understanding, and essentially staying focused on how can we help others. Obviously, lots of people here are here for their own personal growth, to talk about or to hear about other people's experiences and questions concerning this path of the 12 steps for a spiritual awakening. You may be a sponsor who wants to learn from other people's experiences as to what works and what doesn't work. You may be a step guide. I make a distinction. It's a historical distinction on my part. It's not formal and it's not official between sponsor and step guide. There's plenty of material on sponsorship. And if there's any material on step guide, I don't know of it actually, but it's my experience. I've had a relationship with two men who have been my sponsor, who one is and one was. 28 years with the first and 10 with the second. A very different experience because I have not gone through the steps with either one of them. Neither of them was as familiar with the big book and the step process as I either was or wanted to be. So I had to go outside that relationship and engage different men at different times. 4 different men over a 20-year period to go through the book, to go through the steps. Each one was different. Each one was a different experience. Each not radically different. I would say 90% the same, 10% different. But that 10% was quite different. And it was a project, and they were project managers. It had a beginning and an end. And so it's my experience. And many of you now have had similar experiences, and yourself are either sponsors and step guides, or sponsors or step guides, or just step guides. And or you're here to hear other people's commentary on their questions, their experiences with being sponsors and or step guides, and or being sponsor and step guide. And that has its own complications, might be too strong, but experiences. Being here doesn't mean that you're committed to being a sponsor or step guide. This means that you're interested in your own personal spiritual path for sure, and perhaps in some way in helping other people. That's really the key here, the central theme. Number 1, how can you help yourself? Number 2, how can you help other people? Keep it really simple. So if you have questions, you have experiences, especially practical questions and experiences with either being a sponsor, being a step guide, or with other sponsees or sponsors or step guides, knowledge and or experience. That's what we're here to talk about and share. And there's no question that couldn't or shouldn't be asked. Any question that you have in your head or your heart is worthy of exploring here. Don't leave anything unasked or any rock not turned over here. And there'll be some redundancies from other conversations because this is a brand new group. This group has never been together before. This group here, the constituency of this group. Please.
Hi, everybody. What I would like to hear is what I'm the type of sponsor who goes through the big book one-on-one with the person and goes through all the steps. However, the only steps that I really don't know quite what to do with are step 6 and step 7. And I'm just wondering how other people who sponsor, what type of ritual they might go through with their sponsees in order to add meaning to the process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Wonderful question, because Bill doesn't really give us much in the big book. Gives us a little bit more of his commentary in the 12 and 12. And perhaps I'll speak first, and then anybody else can build on that with their questions or their knowledge and or their experience with it. Step 6 and 7 both turned out to be very powerful experiences for me. The first time I went through the book when I was 4 years sober, was the first time I went through the steps with somebody who knew what they were doing. And when we came to the 6th step, he said, read it and highlight it, just as he had with others in the big book. He did not use the 12 and 12. It's one paragraph on page 76, read and highlight. The essence of it is willingness. My interpretation of step 6 is to make a list of character defects. It's not what it says, but my at least approach to it was, I need to be very clear about what my character defects are. So I'm going to list them so that they're very clear, and I'm going to discuss them with my step guide, because that's the replication of steps 4 and 5 in terms of the ritual, as you indicated. And human nature, people really like and need some ritual, some rubrics with regard to their actions. It's important, even though it's perhaps not suggested or even alluded to in the big book. We can keep in mind what the person might need or what your personal experience is that was helpful. So wide open spaces here. So I made the list and I read it to my step guide, actually over the telephone. We didn't even meet. And he told me to now do the same thing with step 7. And that is, number 1, read it and highlight it. And number 2, write out your own 7-step prayer. That was part of his ritual, because he had done that with the 3rd step and explained it. We're not trying to improve the prayers in the big book. We're trying to understand them. When you write out the prayer in your own words, you have to get underneath the meaning of the words in the big book, not to improve it, not to change it, but to make it personal, to understand it. So that was part of a little ritual. And then he said, pray it. That was it. Now he suggested praying on the knees. Again, a little piece of a ritual here. And he was very clear, though. We don't get on our knees to get God's attention. We get on our knees to get our own attention, an act of humility, an act of subordination, an act of surrender, an act expresses physically that I need help and that help's available. And I can rely on that help. Again, another ritual. Some people I hear suggest to their sponsees in a way that replicates step three's suggestion that we pray with somebody else. They recommend that you pray the 7-step prayer with your sponsor and or your somebody else. It's not been my experience. I've gone through the steps 4 times with 4 different people, and these were mechanics with the steps, and none of them ever suggested that I pray with them. They said, you pray. And that was my experience. So I don't give that recommendation, but there's no different. I don't disagree with it, and it's just not my experience. Again, what's not in the big book and not in the 12 and 12 is what I heard in a meeting after I had prayed the 7-step prayer and been frustrated that nothing had changed the following day. Of course, I'm very patient, tongue in cheek. And in my men's stag step group, it's a crosstalk meeting. One of them suggested that he had prayed specifically for the removal of a specific character defect. Again, not in the big book or the 12 and 12. But I thought about it, and I exercised that in a couple of days and got on my knees, as was suggested, prayed the prayer from the book, or about to pray the prayer from the book when I hesitated because I realized that I wasn't willing at all. It was a shock to me. Many of the people on the call have already heard me unpack this 6 and 7 step. And I had to stop there. I am on my knees about to pray the prayer, realizing that I don't want to change in this area. Several months of 4th step, several hours of 5th step, preparation over the weekend for 6 and 7, and here I am, unwilling. I was really amazed and disturbed, kind of embarrassed, actually. But I then prayed the prayer specifically for the removal of the specific character defect. And I called the step guide and related that to him, and he was appreciative of my openness with him. And he said, okay, now stop the behavior. So he gave me an additional insight that I'm responsible for my behavior. I'm not responsible for my inclinations. I'm powerless over my inclinations. That's what 6 step and 7 step is all about. But I'm responsible for the behavior to change. And he suggested then, again, a practical rubric, if you will, a practical action on my part to pray every day and to call him every day, praying for the removal because I'm powerless, but calling him every day because I'm responsible and human being. And within a 24 to 48 hour period, the behavior changed. It took a couple of years of consistent daily prayer and consistent periodic accountability for the inclination to go away, but right around 2 years, the inclination went away and it never has returned. So it's a really great question. And I think without making my comments on it specifically each time, you could see that there were things that are not in the big book that came out of experience, mine and or other people's. And there were some rituals there in terms of both writing and in terms of on your knees and in terms of accountability that aren't in the big book, but these were the experiences of other people and my experience. 6 and 7 probably are the most impactful steps in that sense of changing behavior. 4 and 5 were the most impactful steps in terms of changing my thinking and my feelings and my attitude. But 6 and 7 were the most effective steps in changing my behavior. What a great question. Based on my comments, does that help? Or do you have any comments or questions about that?
It does help. And I guess I was just looking for a little validation, really, when I think about it, because I love rituals. So I think I was just looking for someone to say, like,
Well, and
Yeah, they're great, or
well, no, I mean, look over human history.
yeah.
All religious traditions have ritual, rubrics, liturgy. In fact, the word liturgy means work of the people. So absolutely validated by history, let alone by now my personal experience, without making it religious, without making it magical, without making it Disneyland or New Age fairy tales. There's the real problem with human beings. They get wrapped around the human process, thinking if I only get the words right, if I only do the right actions, I'm going to get whatever, fill in the blank. And that's just not true. Yeah,
Thank you.
please.
I'm so glad you talked about the 6 and 7, because for me, for the first 8 years or something, I didn't pay attention to 6 and 7 because to me it felt like sprinkling fairy dust. And my sponsor had given me a wand that made a noise as you waved it. And it just, that's what I felt like 6 and 7 were. And then I read Drop the Rock. And then there were two things that, one was that I think it was in there, but anyway, someplace, God doesn't take away the character defects that you keep practicing. And I said, holy shit,
That's right.
wow. And then the other one, actually, I'm in FA, and I call it my 30,000 feet epiphany. I was watching this movie, and Morgan Freeman is playing God, and he says to this woman who says, all I prayed for every day was a family that stayed together and that, prayed together and that worked together. And, my life is falling apart. And he says, do you think that God erases these things or gives you what you pray for? Or does God give you the chance to practice what you pray for? And just opportunities to practice. And so that's how I've approached the 6th and 7th step from then on. And sometimes I hate it because I get opportunities to practice letting go of control and whatever with my sons and doing all this stuff. But I always say, okay, I'm getting chances to practice. And just when I think I've got it, I've got it, the heat gets turned up.
Yeah.
And I have more of a challenging situation. And so I now think of 6 and 7 as the most active steps besides 4 that it's not, but it went from a, fairy dust to
Right.
a total involvement. So
Right.
thanks.
Right. 100% my experience. Actually, the first time I went through the steps, the paragraphs are just like one paragraph for step 6, one paragraph for step 7, and no real information in terms of application. So yeah, I just like bypassed it, except once I got engaged with this step guide and learned a little bit more about the application of it, it became, as you indicated, one of the most powerful a combination of the two steps that became the most powerful and useful on a regular basis. Thank you.
Good morning, Herb. How are you? Thank you for this wonderful meeting. I love coming here.
Yeah.
A couple things. I just want to kind of confirm what you said about 6 and 7, because when I came up against some tough issues, it was suggested to me by my sponsor that I write a 7-step prayer.
Yep.
And it would change every day. And I wrote it out for a long time until I really started to feel like I was being changed, by that daily attention to the bondage that was in me and asking God to remove it. So that was really helpful. The other thing is, like after a sponsee finishes a 5th step and you go to 6, I used to have them list all their character defects, and my experience was they found that overwhelming. That really life teaches. And so today the defect might be something like defiance. Tomorrow it might be dishonesty. But as they come up, then you pay attention to it, and eventually you probably work through most of them, that way. So I have 2 questions.
Sure.
One is, this is a little tricky. I have a sponsee, I'm an OA, who has certain mental health issues, which she completely, is open about. One of them is depression, which gets worse in the winter.
Mhm.
But what's very interesting, like I'm not a therapist, so I say that's an outside issue, it's good to see somebody gets medication and all that. But the issue that's difficult is she's starting to see that part of this depression, her ego gets involved in a lot of sorry about that.
Sure.
The ego gets involved in self-pity, take care of me, I'm different, woe is me. And as a sponsor, I'm thinking, what is my responsibility here? Like, I can't deal with the depression per se, but I can have her look at what's going on in terms of using that as either an opportunity to control, manipulate, that sort of thing. I wondered what your thoughts were on that.
Well, I think you're right on track with that. Your role is not a therapist. Your role is not a doctor, but you're very open, and that is your role, to suggest professional help and or medication. 100%. Now, you're not recommending it. You're suggesting that there be a professional evaluation for these kinds of things, because that's what they're there for. And depression is a legitimate emotional reaction. Sometimes it's depression because Carlene was mentioning it. People haven't changed their behavior and they're still getting the same results despite everything else that they're doing. And they really do need to change their behavior if they're going to change their feelings. It's counterintuitive. Most people think, well, I need to feel better before I do better. Yeah, that's not even good science anymore.
Mm-hmm.
No, I need to do better in order to feel better. And you've heard the saying, I'm sure, in your meetings or someplace, that if you want self-esteem, do esteemable things. I am absolutely not dismissing clinical depression and or episodic cyclical depression. As you mentioned, the winter situation. That's real. That's very real.
Mm-hmm.
So now going back to the heart of your question is, so what's your role? What can I do?
As far as the self-pity, the
Yeah.
woe is me, take
Yeah.
care of me kind of stuff.
Yeah. I would ask 2 questions. I'm assuming she's done steps 1 through 9 and finished the 9th step. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
She has finished her 9th step.
Yes.
All right. Then I would ask her 2 questions. Number 1, how's your meditation practice? Does she have
Okay.
Does she have one?
Uh-huh.
No. I'm asking you.
I believe so.
But
She's
you don't
told
know
me
that.
that she does it, but not very consistently.
I'm sorry. I'm not quite sure what your answer was about. Do you know or not that she has a meditation practice?
She does. I would say it's inconsistent.
Oh, sure, like many people. Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Have you asked her what her practice is?
I haven't. I will. Okay.
Oh, that's a really important question, because lots of people tell me, oh, I meditate. Yeah. And I ask them what they're doing. Oh boy, does that get weird. Really?
Okay.
Seriously. I mean, they're not doing meditation, as I understand it anyway, out of the big book, step 11. They're doing something. And that's
Mhm.
good. I mean, it's good to do something, but it's really good to do what the big book suggests in terms of meditation, which is praying, thinking, listening to our thinking, and getting guidance from our thinking. That's the
Okay.
short version. That's the short version. And whether they do it 1 minute or 20 minutes, it really doesn't matter as long as they begin and do what they can and do what they will do. That's what I suggest to people. Start with 1 minute of listening, not praying, not writing, not reading. Nope. Listening to your thinking, 1 minute, let it build to 15 or 20 minutes, and do what you can and do what you will. Do what you can and do what you will. And then hold her accountable for, ask her if she,
Okay.
if she would like to be held accountable for that on a weekly or bi-weekly or monthly basis. I suggest weekly at the beginning.
Okay.
That's
That
number
sounds
one.
good.
But, well, I'm not through.
Okay.
Yeah. No. This is a really important issue, not for the circumstances you're describing, but I think in general sponsorship with everybody. They get really fuzzy, they get really lazy. They tell you what they think you want to know, but they don't really tell you the truth. I'm sorry, I have lots of experience with longtime people, and they don't know that they don't know, and they don't even know they're being dishonest. So don't trust what they say. All right. Have them describe what they're doing. That's a real revelation of what they're thinking and feeling and understanding. All right. So the second issue is she helping anybody?
Yes, she's sponsoring one person now and she's looking to take on another. Yes, very good.
Excellent. And does she connect to meetings either on the Zoom or physical meetings?
Oh, yes.
All right.
Mhm.
And is there a 1 a week physical meeting in that mix?
No physical meetings at this point.
Is that because she's handicapped and or the geography doesn't support it?
She's not handicapped, but it might be the geography because I'd have to ask her about that. She's in Santa Cruz, so I don't know.
Well, I don't either, and different fellowships have different density with regard to physical meetings these days. It's problematic coming out of the COVID. My own experience is I love Zoom. It's so convenient, but I'm not
There's
particularly.
Isaac. Go get him. Go get him. There he is. Okay, sweetie, I'm going to take Corey home.
All right, you want to? Are you talking to me?
No,
or
you can't
dog?
come.
No, I'm not. Somebody else is.
Oh, I see. I got confused there. I'm not particularly social, but I found that I wanted to go back to my home group that started physical meeting just to get a sense of the difference between the Zoom and the physical. And I think my assessment is that the physical meeting, even for me who doesn't quote need social a lot, still needs social connection. Number one, just to feel to continue to really feel existentially, if you will, part of a community, but also my sponsor originally, and I developed the habit, said, go 10 minutes early, stay 10 minutes after, and talk to people, because he knew I wasn't very social. And that changed my whole approach to meetings, because it made me an active part of a community. And so I would suggest that, depending, on circumstances and common sense, that she go to a physical meeting once a week, go early, 10 minutes, stay late, 10 minutes, reach out, talk to people, help out if she can, if there's something to do. In those days, back in when I first started, there were cups to wash and ashtrays to wash. And that manual labor allowed me to feel part of and to be recognized as part of a community, which was so important to me, who was basically, I lived as a monk for 7 years, and there was no talking for 7 years. I enjoyed that part. So, yeah. Does that help?
Thank you very much for that. And just a quick question, the before meeting and the after meeting, do the traditions apply to those?
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Before the actual meeting starts
Yeah.
and finishes, are we expected to honor the traditions, like not talk about baseball, politics, or is that really open-ended?
Yeah, that's a slippery slope.
Hmm.
That's a very slippery slope. I don't think I mean, there are no rules, of course. My recommendation was keep it focused on the purpose of the group and the meeting and not make it a neighborhood bar room conversation about baseball, football. Too easy. Gossip about people and headlines and politics. Too easy. And it's a slippery slope. Have her think, what is her purpose in going to a meeting? And there's many, many answers to that. But each person needs to have a personal clarity about why am I going to a meeting? Because I have
To
nothing.
grow her recovery and to give service. She goes to
Perfect.
AA 7 days a week and she gives service there. Plus she gives service in OA. And of course, to deepen her knowledge of step work.
Well, excellent, excellent, excellent. All of those, if she can stay focused and make it meaningful, not just blah, 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 that I'm really there to become more conscious and I'm really there to become more helpful. Those are yes, you said it. You said it in different words, but for herself, for her own recovery, yes, 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 absolutely. But also to perhaps help another person with their
Yes,
recovery.
sure. Okay, Herb, that's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. Great questions and good dialogue. Thank you so much. Please.
Thank you for taking my question. I have used your column 3 and 4 worksheets for quite a while now on multiple sponsees. Currently, I have a sponsee that I'm having go through and use them. So these are new to her. She's never been exposed to them before. But I came up with something that I've never come across with this sponsee. As I was trying to get her to elaborate, to embellish in her column 3, she got very upset and said to me, I can't lie. I don't feel that way. And I tried to, back up a minute, try to go another angle, but it ended up bringing her to tears.
In
and
what
so
way?
I just backed off completely.
You mean the effort?
She got so upset. She kept saying, I just can't lie. I can't say that. And I didn't want to pursue it any further, of course.
Sure.
And so I just let it go. And
Well, yes, exactly. Meet them where they are. Meet them where they are. That was a counsel given to me by Dr. Berger, who was a therapist, and that's how he was trained to deal with clients. Meet them where they are, not where they think they are, and not where I want them to be, but where they actually are. And I encounter people who are overwhelmed with the column 3 and column 4. I don't even try to get them to do even like there's 7 questions or items to complete in column 3. I really try to focus on self-esteem and pride and have in a gentle way try to expand it a little bit, use more words, try to help tease it out from them, because in the stage metaphor, you've probably heard me talk about that, is so helpful when they put themselves on a stage and they talk about the relationship with the person, and then they talk about the perception of the audience and the person, and that really helps, but it takes a little bit of patience and alternative vocabulary and staying away from the form and the structure and the answers, because some people are either challenged with what do they call ADD and dyslexia, or they're just not. They're intimidated by anything that looks like a form or structure or test. And so I just leave it behind and try to help them tease it out. Because what we're really trying to see and what you're trying to do, and following sort of my examples, of course, is have her stretch and to see if there's if she can color outside the lines, to just attempt to imagine, and then perhaps to see that it's not really coloring outside the lines, that in fact she's got some level of delusion there, that she's having a major emotional reaction to it. So my suspicion is there's something there that she can't see, but she's being blocked in seeing.
And I agree with you too, but you
Yeah.
also hit it on the head when you mentioned the I think it's ADHD in this case. And
All right. Yeah.
but I had not put that together with the fact that the form and the structure might be intimidating, but I can see that now that, yeah.
I've had people say, "Oh my God, it looks like an IRS tax form." And now, of course, that's the way it looks. But when you get into it, if you're willing to be open and vulnerable, I mean, it's just a straightforward dialogue with yourself. And so just help her see what she can see, and then just move on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
No, great question. Absolutely wonderful question. And I have a lot of experience with that. I deal with men who are more prone to dyslexia and ADD, I think, than women are, but I don't work with enough women to actually conclude that. Thank you.
Two kind of brief points for just I'm seeking confirmation of them, and then that leads up to what something I'm kind of challenged by right now. So when we were going through the year-long 12-step, you would often call the defects defaults, and I've done more research and stuff.
Yeah.
And there, I mean, fear, sometimes impatience, they serve a purpose, right? So if I can understand that these defects / defaults are not so binary, and they can sometimes serve a purpose, or there's a spectrum, let's say a spectrum of it. But the key to that, understanding it and accepting it and working with it, is the awareness and the meditation, and all that gets me there. Another thing that gets me there is the service. Now, here's one of the questions. Of course, it probably behooves us to do our service primarily in whatever fellowship we're in, but can it be any service? I mean, can I just, yes, okay, good. So living life by the principles and demonstrating that there are good people out there, I guess, right? Okay.
Well, there are bad people. And bad people need as much help as good people, or maybe even more. So it's okay to be, how can I help? Those are the lenses I wear. Not how can I help in my fellowship, or how can I help in 12-step fellowships? No. How can I help in the world that I encounter?
Right. The next right thing in front of you, right?
There you go.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. So the things that were the core of my step 4 the first couple times are no longer, I don't want to act like I'm all that. That's for sure.
I get it. Yeah,
but
they're
not as much a struggle. I think you were talking about it a minute ago. After about 2 years, that stuff wasn't the challenge anymore. Then you had a different challenge.
Yeah.
And I find sometimes, I'll eat a whole bag of M&Ms or something in response, or I'll play a video game, or I'll watch 5 Netflix 40-minute shows or something, I understand why I'm going there. I almost understand the compulsion, but I also would like to get away from it. And so I'm 3 years into this thing now. I first came into AA December of 19. I did my 2 big ones with you, and then a third with a group where we were all in your course. And I'm getting there. I work on it every day, but I'm not there.
Where's there? Where is there?
Where it's natural.
Where what's natural?
My desired response, living according to the principles.
That's a lifetime effort. Read pages 84 and 85 about step 10. And it says the proper use of the mind, all right, is to be aware of what he calls there God's will. I call
Right.
it a reality as it's manifesting. All right. And the
Vigilance.
property, say it again. Say it again.
Vigilance. We need to stay vigilant. If we're always
Yeah,
aware.
yeah, but that's not tight-fisted and
Ah.
holding your breath. No, that's just, he says, watch. Gentle, watch. Like a radar. I use the image of a radar sweep. All right. I've got principles now when I finish step 9. I've got principles that guide me, and I call them guidelines and guardrails. And I do a radar sweep, all right, on a daily basis. Is there any blip on the screen that tells me I'm out of alignment with my principles? That's all. It's a radar sweep, though. There's no tension here. I'm expecting that there will be radar sweeps because I'm a human being and I will never transcend my humanity. Bill says when they crop up, watch for them when they crop up. And in the 12 and 12, he says, it's a spot check inventory. When I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me. On a daily basis, I will be disturbed. Now, 35 years ago, I was grossly disturbed and should have been. Yesterday, I was disturbed in such a mosquito dimension.
Okay.
I was a little bit inconsiderate. I was a little bit insensitive. I was a little bit whatever, you know. And so, as you just said, I was using a chainsaw 35 years ago to reform me. Today, I use fine sandpaper.
Thank you. Okay.
But we never transcend our humanity. What you're really talking about, well, there's two things. There's at least two things. Bill suggests progress, not perfection.
Yep.
Never perfection. That's why I asked, what's your goal here? No. Yeah, you're becoming a really decent human being.
I'd like to think I was close to that before. I just had some bad habits, but yeah.
Yeah, well, see, there was the delusion.
Yeah.
I thought I was a Renaissance man, and when I did the 4th step, I turned out to be a Neanderthal. Yeah, exactly. I'm serious, 100%. And today I'm a pretty decent guy, but I'm still a human being.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you've probably seen that being exposed to me enough times. And the default is a word that came to me from Dr. Berger, who is the psychologist who's got the current vocabulary concerning human nature. Bill calls it instincts gone awry. These are, and again, Dr. Berger has upgraded from default to unhealthy coping strategies. That's a great phrase. Unhealthy coping strategies. As I get more healthy, my coping strategies get healthier. But that's the role of the 10th step, isn't it?
Yes.
The 10th step is about ever improving my consciousness and my behavior. When they crop up, I will take care of them. And Bill talks in 6 and 7, going back to the original conversation that we had an hour ago, about 6 and 7. Bill's very clear. Those are the steps that bring us from childhood to adulthood. And now, again, I'll quote Dr. Berger, it's on my mind. He's really unpacking emotional sobriety. That's what you're talking about.
Yes.
I want to be more balanced than out of balance on a daily basis. And I will be more or less more balanced as I practice. Carlene was mentioning that. Practice. All right. We practice step 10. We practice step 11. We practice step 12 principles. In fact, I broadened it. All right. Life is a practice. All it is, we're practicing being decent human beings. Most of the time, after we've done some work, we get it pretty well. All right. But it's never 100%, and don't expect it.
Okay.
Yeah. Great
Thank you.
conversation. Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, that's a very healthy conversation for each of us to have with ourselves. Certainly to have as our approach to helping other people. Don't show disappointment or whatever, certainly any type of punitive action or anger when in fact they disappoint you or don't live up to your expectations. There's where compassion comes in. Step 12 is really about compassion, meaning I'm connected to them. I want to help them, but I'm not judge and jury or executioner at all in any parental sense, right? And Bill said it very clearly. You've heard me say it many times because it's such simplicity. There's only 2 disciplines in Alcoholics Anonymous. Quite frankly, I think there's only 2 disciplines in life. It has nothing to do with addiction, but it has an intensity with regard to addiction. There's only 2 disciplines. One is the darkness, the other is the light. You're either going toward the darkness or you're going toward the light, and there's no stopping, there's no resting. The dimmer switch is either going up a notch at a time or going down a notch at a time. And the only way we prevent it from going down is to stay gently pressed up against that dimmer switch, because it's hardwired structurally to go backwards. Dr. Tebow said that ego has an uncanny way of regenerating itself. The first 9 steps for the deflation of the ego, the next 3 steps for sustaining the light and improving the light. As we stay gently pressed up against it with our practice of 10, 11, and 12, the lights get brighter, the lights get brighter, the lights get brighter. The really good news is we're in relationship with infinite light. I mean, these are the concepts that are underneath the work of the big book. Step 3 is about committing to a relationship. I use the term more recently with darkness and light because it's so easy to picture. And that dimmer switch is going up a notch at a time. After we finish step 9, the lights are on, they're pretty bright. But there's always more light. I jokingly say for us addicts, that's really good news, because there's never enough. And Pascal said it, the hole in us is in the shape of God. Carl Jung's original direction was to find a spiritual experience to Roland Hazard. Go find a spiritual experience. And he casually said in a letter to Bill Wilson, human nature, have a deep hunger and thirst for the spirit, the immaterial, the spirit. And they get distracted by spirits. In the case of alcohol, of course, that has a lot of resonance in terms of its symbolism. But spirits is really the material. We have this deep hunger and thirst for the immaterial. That's the way we're built. But until we know that, we get distracted by the material, whatever that means. Yeah, powerful. Thanks for prompting that out of me.
Hi, Herb.
Hi.
That was great. I actually forgot my question because I was reading so fast on the notes.
There you go. Write it down.
I did write it down beforehand. But you know, I had been contemplating, like, because there's only 2 disciplines, but what do I tell my Al-Anons? That alcohol is not one of them for them. So I like that it's the darkness.
Well, that's why I switched to that, so that it gets out of this addiction world and talks about human nature, because as you heard me speak and you've experienced it, unmanageability is the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, back to my question. Pass through my ADD. I am observing that I have less contact when I start hitting 7, 8 rather than 4, steps 7, 8. Now, as a step guide, that makes sense because I think the instructions are really clear after that, and they just go back to your workshop and don't need extra help. But I do have it with my sponsees as well. And a lot of those conditions they're alcoholic in AA sponsees. But as we hit 8, and there's that part about change your behavior before you make amends, I was wrong to keep reacting, but you can't keep reacting to everything your loved one says in that way. But what I find is that they don't have the other communication. It's usually they grew up in alcoholism. It's an Al-Anon issue. It came out in the 4th step, and we've now moved on. I've said it once. I clarified, no, I'm not your Al-Anon sponsor. I don't sponsor anyone who's not in Al-Anon. So I've really kind of hit it straight. And then we hit with how can you change behavior that you don't even know you're having, right?
Well, by the time you're in your 8th step, you should know you're having it.
They know they're having, but they don't have the communication tools to detach.
Oh, right, all right.
Honey, there's nothing I like to do better than discuss what you're discussing after I cook dinner, so you react, or whatever. They don't have those kind of things you get out of Al-Anon. I don't know. So that's where I find I am with a lot of them. And my real question was, when do you release them to make amends, or do you send them back to clear up the 6 and 7?
Well, I'm not sure what your question is, but let me answer what I think I heard. First of all, I'll tell you what I think I heard. And that is, when somebody's actually in their 9th step, what is your role as a step guide? My role, I assume, is accountability partner. Until they're finished their 9th step, they're not finished with me. Even if I'm not, especially if I'm not their sponsor. All right. I suggest to them that they be accountable to me for checking off the list, the 8-step list, by doing the 9th step of reporting in on a weekly basis. I suggest they report in on a weekly basis. How are you doing with your 9th step? Yes, I made 1. I made 2. No, I didn't make any. All right. We have a conversation about that. And so I stay in a very active role while they're doing their 9th step.
I have trouble getting them to the 9th step. We're
Oh,
on
well,
7,
sure, of
8,
course.
and they stop calling. Or
And then what? They what?
Either stop calling, or we're discussing changing the behavior before you approach the
Right,
person. That's when
right,
I
right.
usually use that.
Have you suggested that they keep in contact with you?
Yeah, all of them I suggest.
And that's the best you can do?
Miss.
No,
Yeah, just
that's
keep
it.
in contact. And then, I had some strict sponsors who are like, until you stop reacting to your husband, you don't, until you stop being late, you don't approach that job, right? But, with some of this going into the 9th step, some of these behaviors I don't think will get completely released. So I my inner dialogue has the hot button released. So maybe you're not able to detach from your loved one, but are you reacting destructively to them? If you stop that part, maybe we're ready for amends, rather than, because these behaviors don't become perfect in Al-Anon.
No, yeah, right. Or ever.
Or ever, yeah.
No,
Searching for perfection is.
I'd be concerned about that. It's good in theory. It's excellent in theory. Don't make amends until you've actually changed the behavior. In something as gross as my own situation, don't make amends to your wife for your infidelity until, in fact, you stopped your infidelity. I mean, that's the gross thing. It becomes maybe a little more subtle when you're talking about criticism and or the dialogue between partners or siblings or mothers and fathers. That might take some time to change, using 6 and 7 as the tools of change, meaning prayer and accountability. I mean, from my standpoint, that's a flawless combination. Flawless. It's 100% effective. Maybe not immediately, but relatively soon. Prayer and accountability. And so I would be really stressing that part for the change. But I agree, don't make amends until you've really changed your behavior. But at the same time, perhaps making amends will be the place where the behavior will change because in making the amends, you will say to the person, I am not perfect and I may slip off that slippery slope every once in a while. I'm giving you permission to confront me with it. No,
Ah,
you're not responsible. You're not responsible to change me or to reprimand me, actually, but I am inviting you to confront me.
so you go as a human,
Exactly.
just
Right.
fallible traits, and it's okay.
I'll really do the best I can. I can't. Now, in the case of infidelity, I think you really have to be pretty secure in that, because that's gross, as I use the term. The others are not as, my Catholic background wants me to say mortal sin versus venial sin. That may not ring with you.
I don't know what that means.
Yeah. Mortal sin, you'll go to hell. Venial sin, you'll go to purgatory. So these are all the stories. So there you go.
Okay. All right. So it's kind of, if it's like you can't make amends for if you're still drinking. Yeah, I won't drink around, and you're still alcoholic, right? But if it's not those gross things, it's more, maybe I encourage them to move forward with the 9th step. As long as you got accountability, as long as you keep praying on it, let's move forward and see what happens as a change in your relationship. It's kind of that kind of encouragement.
Exactly.
And stay off, like some of them have some outright, well, I need to go to Al-Anon, but I don't, and just be like, that's between you and your sponsor, and stay off.
Oh,
that.
for sure.
And just let's move forward with the 9th step.
Right.
That's-
Right.
Okay.
But keep them, from my standpoint, if you're helping them with the steps, keep them if they're willing to, keep them accountable until they finish their 9th step. And meanwhile, I'm sure you know this, some others might not, and that is the Big Book suggests we commence this way of living as we cleaned up the past. That's not a paraphrase. That's a direct quote, page 84, I believe. We commence this way of life as we cleaned up the past. My interpretation is we start practicing. If you don't have a current daily practice of 10, 11, and 12, we start it there at the conclusion of the 8th step before you ever do a number 1 on your 9th step list. You begin a daily practice of 10, 11, and 12. And that then brings us brings us to more consciousness, to more consciousness, to more consciousness, to more consciousness, 10, 11, and 12. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Good conversation. Thank you.
Hi, Herb. Hi, everybody. What a great meeting. Appreciate all the sharing. I think I just wanted to share my experience with picking the right person or as a sponsor, or once being aware that there's something wrong with the relationship, getting out of it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I had a sponsor for 20 years who taught me so much about staying sober and working the steps. But she had the thing that the catalyst for my comment is when you spoke about, being disappointed or trying to hold people to expectations, my expectations, her expectations.
Yeah.
That became a critical, chronic problem in the relationship.
Sure.
To the point that I just adopted it. It became part of me, what she was doing with me, which is what happens when you work with somebody closely for a long period of time. So I'm recovering from that, is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to recover from that.
How did you become conscious of it?
The relationship was becoming strange,
Okay.
what she was doing with me. And strange in that, she's calling me 5 times a day, asking me, where am I? What am I doing? And why am I doing that? And, these kinds of things were happening. And I started praying and saying to God, what's going on? What do I do with this? And I'd like to tell you, I said that prayer and I got an answer and I took action, but it took me 5 years. It took me 5 years. It's like being in an abusive relationship. I was so embedded that, and my answer, God gave me the answer immediately. He said, you have to depend on me, not her. I'm your source, not her.
Wonderful.
But it took me 5 years to disengage.
Mhm.
And it took an event where I couldn't do anything but separate
Mm.
from her for that to happen. So now I'm trying to learn, discard what I learned and adopted and learn a different way. And this is so helpful. And I'm sober 86 years, 36 years. I got sober in 86.
Yeah.
And so I just, as a caution, maybe to people that are new to this, there was a lot of isolation in the relationship. She discouraged me from being involved with my family. She discouraged me from,
Well,
just-
that sounds like a very unhealthy, codependent, cultish relationship and you were fortunate to become conscious, and even at 5 years to change it. You were very fortunate. Somehow you were guided, all right. The role of a sponsor is to help, not to become a friend, although friendships develop. But we need to be careful. There's a slippery slope there concerning that codependency that builds. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the image, the suggestion that you heard is just brilliant. Depend on me, not AA, not your sponsor, not the steps. Depend on me. That's the total point of it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And today I have a new sponsor who's,
Mhm.
very different, that God really led me to, because I've been praying for guidance on
Yeah.
what direction to go in that.
Yeah.
And the cool thing, I'll just finish with this, is prayer it really does work. God really does speak,
Yeah.
he's never silent. Whatever spiritual path you're on, there's always an answer. The question is, am I ready to hear it? Am I ready to act on it? Do I have the consciousness to be secure in it?
I'm going to add something here that might give it a depth of a dimension that most people are unaware of. I've got a language background in Latin, and the word obedience comes from obidere. Obidere in Latin means to listen.
Ah,
I know what you just said. I listen and I take action. Yeah.
thank you for that.
No, thank you for setting it up. It was a perfect teaching moment. Thank you. I hope everybody really heard that. Obidere. To listen to the guidance. That's the whole point of meditation. And step 10, actually, is to get the guidance as to how to deal with when I'm disturbed and how to self-regulate to become in balance. Most recently, I've been really exploring emotional sobriety, and that's really what I think Bill had in mind. Cutting those false dependencies with sponsors, cutting those false dependencies. He said, even with AA.
Mhm.
Mhm. Yeah. Thanks so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Lucille, please.
Thank you very much, Herb. One of the questions I have is around sponsees wanting to make amends because they feel so terrible about what they did. And for me, when I'm having that discussion, it's like, wait a minute, is this you wanting to make amends because of some damage you did or some harm that you did to this person, or hurt them, or some wrong that you did? And they were like, oh, no, I was drunk and I just feel so bad. And it's like, I say, oh, so you want to make these amends so you will feel better. I'm like, okay, well, that's not what amends are, And And then I remembered when I heard myself saying that, it's like, oh my God, that's what I want. That's what I did all those years ago. It was like,
Sure.
I remembered when my sponsor was like, oh my God, I feel so terrible. I got to write to
Yeah,
him.
we have mixed motives, sure. Mhm.
Yeah. You know, she was like, no, 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 you leave all the old boyfriends alone. You know, you just, we're not ready for any of that yet. You know, so I find myself, you know, that sponsees for me, you know, when I'm listening to them and I hear, and I don't know why I'm responding, I just trust my intuition.
Yes.
And then I remember, oh yeah, I was doing that. That's exactly where I was at that time,
Yeah.
trying to make me feel better about me because I felt so much shame around my
Right.
drinking and blah, blah, blah. And so now, you know, what I try to do is when people are sort of feeling that thing to cleanse themselves, if you will, you know, of this terrible shame, remorse, whatever, is to sort of introduce the whole notion of, well, let's look at the harm, let's look at the wrong, let's look at the hurt, let's look at the damage,
Yeah.
and then how are you feeling about that? And
Yeah.
are you ready to own it? Are you ready to
Right.
sit with the person
Right.
and own it? And is that required? Or is it just you feel bad because you went off one night and did X, you know? And I think it for me, that takes really teasing out, and it takes time.
It does.
And it's to put a halt to that rush to sort
Yeah.
of, you know,
Yes.
sort of window wash, you know, the
Right.
anyway, I would just like sort of your input on that, and two, breaking down. They may all mean the same thing, like damage and harm and hurt and wrongs, but you know, when I'm working with somebody, as somebody did with me, was to like break it into that and not categorize them, but there are levels, like you talked about infidelity. There
Right.
are levels of harm and hurt
Right.
and
Right.
emotional upset, and you know, some of my emotional stuff actually just meant a change in behavior, a change in attitude, a
Correct.
change in
Right.
my
Right.
willingness to be open and accept people exactly the way they were, you know,
Yeah.
because I'm sorry, just didn't cut it anymore.
Right.
So for me, it's taken a long, long time. And as I said, I just find with sponsees now, like the old tape is being replayed, and I don't know if that's everybody else's experience or not. So
I'm pretty confident everybody can relate to the description of the experience that you have right then. And I'll just add to it, supplement what you said, and that is the distinction between what I did and the harm that it caused. Most people, if you ask them what was the harm, they start describing what they did.
yeah.
Because they're not clear that what they did is, sure, it was unhealthy, it was unfortunate, yes, and you need to change that if you want to be a better person, absolutely, your behavior, but it's not the harm. The behavior is not the harm. The harm is the negative impact of your behavior. Perhaps there is not harm. And my step guide said, Herb, you're just not that powerful or important. You're overestimating your impact on other people. They actually don't think very much about you. And if they do, it's not very healthy. And certainly not very often. So he really challenged me on defining the harm, the negative impact. And that's what you alluded to very nicely. I'm going to refer to the big book because it captures it in terms of how you started out talking about what the priority is. The priority is not the person making amends. The priority is the person to whom you're making amends. And the big book is quite clear. At the moment, page 77, at the moment, we are trying to put our lives in order. That's about you, the person who's making the amend. Yes, absolutely. We want to be free of guilt. We want to be free of shame. We want to be free of this darkness. Absolutely. But this is not an end in itself. I'm going back to the book now. Our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. Repair the damage so that you're useful and helpful. And one of the major senior people in the program, before I came in the program, he died that year, Chuck C. talked about balancing the scale of justice. So I love powerful metaphors and images. Lady Justice standing blind with the scale. We're trying to balance the scale. That's what we're trying to do. And as he said, clean up the past or rub out the wrong, the harm done in some creative way, some practical way. And I have to say this every time I talk about the 9th step. You can finish your 9th step. Some people, and you hear it in meetings, oh, you'll never finish your 9th step. It's a lifelong process. That's ignorant. That's somebody who doesn't know what they're talking about. From my standpoint, I feel very strongly about it, as you can tell. You can finish every amend. Dead people who you can't find. And as you indicated, people who you shouldn't find because you have corrupt motives. It's a question I always ask people about, what's their motive here? Yeah. Along with the very specific question is, so what's the harm? And what do you feel is the specific repair of the damage? To get very specific, not blah, 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 and nothing vague. It needs to be really, really specific. Lucille, thank you so much for raising it and phrasing it the way you did. Based on my comments, do you have any additional comments or questions?
No, I wondered if other people experience that same thing and then suddenly realizing it was their experience also.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Hello, Herb, and hello to all. What a good, for me, and obviously I want your comments, Herb, as always. That's one way I keep accountable. But in hearing the discussion, when I recognized my unmanageability by going through the steps, and it, first of all, Brian, alcoholic, sobriety date, January 2nd, 2018. Okay. When I got my unmanageability, which I'll never be 100% until I get to heaven. That's my story. I'll be a work in progress, just like Paul was. My flesh wants to go one direction, and my mind, and I always want to try, and my other part of me wants to go towards God and doing the right thing. But for me, part of my unmanageability and unhealthy coping mechanisms, which was alcohol, chasing women, you name it, was my character defects. And until I got into AA and the 12 steps, I guess I think I knew I had them somewhere as a monkey on my back, but I didn't want to become aware of them, because if I became aware of them, I had to deal with them. And the only thing that helped me was getting into AA and the 12 steps to recognize that. And, I didn't like it. I didn't like it when I got to step 4 and step 5 and 6, but recognizing God was not the problem. I was always a believer, but I had to.
Brian, where's this going? Do you have a question?
Well, in relation to the character defects and the improvement of that and the unmanageability, I find that they're directly tied together for me.
So, phrase it as a question, please.
How entwined do you believe the unmanageability and character defects are together? How entwined together are
Well,
they?
what do you understand as unmanageability?
Wrong behavior?
No, that's not correct.
Well, that's how I understand it.
Well, I understood that. That's why I asked you. I'm saying, no, that's not correct.
Well, then what would it be?
Well, all right. From my standpoint, unmanageability is described on pages 60 to 62 most especially at the top of page 62, where it says selfishness dash self-centeredness, that's the root of our problem. That's
Right.
unmanageability. Unmanageability is that my will is self-centered, that
Mhm.
my will always choose me. And in choosing me, it will always operate on instincts gone awry, fight, flight, and freeze. Now that's the connection to character defects. It's the human condition, not the addict's condition. So I know you know that, but that's the way I frame it in terms of a laser focused answer to the question.
Right, right. Okay, got it. Well, that's what I was looking for. Okay.
Yeah. Addiction is the problem of the substance or process. Unmanageability is the problem of human nature. Human nature is built for survival. When we grow from childhood to adulthood, we have a larger perspective and have evolved to be using our free will in a more healthy way. Well, of course, most adults don't evolve very effectively to that. That's where good religion comes in play in human history. It's the attempt for human beings to become decent human beings. That's what all of the religious traditions are about. And that's what all law is about, is for people to grow up in the confines of law, which is the boundary, if you will, the guardrail, and or in the confines of principles, which is the guardrail. And that would be religious traditions. Yeah. Or good philosophy.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't heard that one before, so thank you.
I've never said it that way before. I make stuff up in relationship to this conversation because I mean, I really think it serves the purpose for us to really see that this is a very human methodology to deal both with addiction, but then to deal with our human nature. And unmanageability is about our human nature. That is that the improper use of my free will to make it the proper use of my free will.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Indeed. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Hi, Herb. Thank you so much. You have just enlightened me. I have a 9th step coming up on Wednesday, and I had brought this up to you before, and you've just enlightened me on how to deal with it.
Oh,
Because one of the things that I heard is she's not addressing the harm. It's more about wanting acceptance of what she had done.
Oh,
And yeah.
oh,
Yeah. I know. And so you've really enlightened me in how to work with this. And the second thing is the meditation and hearing from God. This morning, it's just absolutely awesome. I have a sponsee that has had an extremely difficult time in maintaining any kind of abstinence. And she thinks that I should fire her, and I'm not firing her. It's like I keep telling her, I'm not here to make you perfect. I'm just here to help you. And this morning, as I was doing a rosary, and we're both on the same spiritual level and practice the same religion, and I had read a text from her shortly afterwards, and then the thought came to me of fasting. So I immediately went to the internet and YouTube and looked up a priest that she's very involved with and found something on that. And I just said, wow. And I needed it, because I just spent the weekend camping and spent half of the time on my phone instead of with family. And when I heard that, it's like, okay, I'm giving up that on, the need to play solitaire on my phone when I'm with other people. And then not only that, but
that's a broad definition of fasting, by the way, but a very healthy application.
Exactly. That's exactly what I gain from it. Food is not an issue for me. Well, it has been today, but it's not an issue for me normally. But all that I'm learning from you is just so powerful. The other thing that I'm beginning to focus on is the power of my thoughts and understanding where my thoughts are and how powerful they are.
Huge.
When, it's like, Okay, for instance, 3 years I've been going to this church, and it would not now, but in the past, one of the first 3 years, no one said hello to me. And I finally decided, okay, this is ridiculous. So now I go to that church and I hand out bulletins and I say, good afternoon to everyone. You know, it's like I'm taking responsibility for my actions. I'm doing what I need to do to make me more comfortable in my life. The thing that I have found is that anything that comes, when it comes to character defects, anything that comes at me that disturbs me is an opportunity for me to learn something about myself.
It's an invitation. It's an invitation.
Yes, but then there's always, when I finally grasp what it is, there's always blessings on the other side, like the spirit of criticism. I learned it well from my parents, from the church that I was in the beginning of my life. And it's very heavily ingrained in me. But now when I'm aware, and I'm not always aware, but when I'm aware, I send a blessing to that person instead of the criticism.
That's right.
And it's changing me. It's not doing anything to anybody else, but it's changing my perception and how I feel about myself and about the people around me.
Yeah.
I've learned that the God that's within me loves me.
Yeah.
And that my job is to project that love to other people.
Nice.
Because he loves me.
Yeah.
And I just want to give you just a really cute comment. My husband came home from work, and I was here, and he said, I didn't expect you to be here. And I said, well, where did you think? He said, I thought you would be off with your other boyfriend. And I looked at him and I said, what? And he said, he thought that I would have gone to mass and gone to church. And he said, your other boyfriend, the one that you place above me as your God. And I said, yeah, that's true. So I thought you would like that humor. So that's where I am in my life.
Oh,
So.
That's wonderful. I also want to make a comment to reinforce what you just said. The purpose of prayer is not to change God.
Right.
The purpose of prayer is not to change reality. The purpose of prayer is to change the prayer.
Exactly.
And you said the importance of thought. Prayer done thoughtfully changes my thoughts, my consciousness. Yeah, wonderful.
Exactly. Thank you. And this I have gained in the 2 years that I've been with you.
Yeah. No, wonderful. Yeah, it's clear. It's clear. Yeah, no, that's the evolution of consciousness. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thank you for what you do. Thank you.
You bet.
And blessings to you.
Thank you.
Hi, Herb.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I wanted to just claim my seat today and tell you a little bit about where I'm at, because I've been hiding from talking with you based upon my conversation with you personally. And I had some anxiety and fear. And so out of that conversation of not being specific and being vague, I joined a group of 8 other amazing women that participate in your conversation. We have a Zoom call every Monday morning. And I also asked someone to be my sponsor in the Herb K program versus my other program.
Yeah.
And I'm clear that I'm getting more clarity around my beliefs and my motives of being so self-centered and righteous and arrogant. And I just wanted to get over the anxiety of engaging with you, because what I noticed was there was an element of story with my relationship with my dad, and I would just shut down and get all confused. And that was just a learned helplessness of sorts. And so I wanted to speak out loud today because I led my group today. I volunteered because there was no one to lead our group this morning. So I just threw my hat over the wall and led my group. And I shared all about this with them. And I just wanted to talk and say that and say thank you. And I'm going to keep coming.
Wow, how wonderful. And I love it that you're so courageous and that you keep and vulnerable. You expose yourself here with that very personal revelation, and I really appreciate it. And I'm sure that's the kind of thing that continues giving you the energy to continue gently pressed up against this work.
Yes, and I have the sheets. So, even in my helplessness way of getting confused, I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah, do one at a time, do one line at a time, and work with somebody who has experience with it, and you'll break the code. You'll get the benefit of doing it over time.
Yes, and I'm actually doing the prayers before, step
right.
1, 2, and 3,
Right.
and really holding it in reverence and not in a rush, just really being present.
Yeah. Just be conscious and be patient.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Herb.
you very much. You bet. Got another minute or two. I'll take as much time as is necessary here to address your concerns or questions. So if nobody has any, though, it's interesting from my standpoint. This morning, I spent some time rewording the closing prayer. And for whatever reason, I chose the 7-step prayer. I've been working on it recently. And so one of the major themes of today's conversation was step 6 and 7, which is just a wonderful coincidence, if you will, that kind of synchronicity Carl Jung talks about, that in fact I've adopted the 7-step prayer to reflect emotional sobriety. All right, let's take a look at and pray this prayer that comes from the 7-step prayer. And I broadened it from the beginning and throughout the body of it to incorporate, I believe, the operating principles of emotional sobriety. Spirit of the universe, I am now willing that you should have all of me, healthy and unhealthy. I ask that the impediments in me be removed from me so that nothing stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my helpfulness to others. Grant me knowledge and strength, understanding and effectiveness, wisdom and courage to live in alignment with reality as it truly is. Amen.